Peace be with you. I am Bruce Wozniak. This is Catholic Sports Radio, located at the intersection of your faith life and sports life, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all kinds of other podcast platforms. Be sure that you're subscribing. And wow, to do so, I mentioned this last week, have you seen the new website yet? Not only should you go there to find links to the many places where you can hear the show and for links to Catholic Sports Radio social media, but wow, it's really quite cool. They did a really great job with the new CatholicSportsRadio.net, so do go check that out. And by the way, if you had bookmarked the previous version of the website, you do need to update that. Make sure that the address you're saving in your favorites is CatholicSportsRadio.net and not the messy URL that it was displaying for the previous site. I asked this on last week's episode, but I'll ask it again on the occasion of having passed the half-year mark. What do you think of the show? What am I doing that you like? What do you wish that I would stop doing? What am I not doing that you would like me to add? Go to CatholicSportsRadio.net and use the contact form there, or of course contact me through social media. Also, it bears repeating that on the new site you will see as well that I am going to be a speaker at the Second Global Congress on Sport and Christianity in October in Michigan. Click through on that to find out more about that event. And then if you want to have me as a speaker at an event that your church, your diocese, your organization, whoever is putting on, get in touch and let's see about having me bring my Catholic Sports Radio ministry to your city, your event. In terms of what I've taken to calling my ministry moment for this episode, we don't like that it's happening, and so we don't like to talk about it, but it would be naive of me to ignore the shootings that have been going on in our country, and maybe we just don't like bringing it up because we're afraid. But take comfort in that God is our protector, and by being faithful to Him and believing in that, He will have a place for us in eternity. We know this because in Psalm 91 it says, "For He commands His angels with regard to you, to guard you wherever you go." And then it goes on to say, "Because He clings to me, I will deliver him. Because He knows my name, I will set him on high. He will call upon me, and I will answer. I will be with him in distress. I will deliver him and give him honor." Friends, we have also been told to have grace and mercy, so let's continue to pray for our nation, for the families affected by these incidents, and yes, even for those who have committed these acts. And let us remember that God is with us always. On episode 29, we are timely as it relates to the NFL season, for all intents and purposes being upon us, what with preseason games well underway. You might remember back on episode 5 of Catholic Sports Radio, my guest was Pro Football Hall of Famer Joe DeLamalure, who played 13 seasons in the NFL. My guest this time was a head coach in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins, plus he was the offensive coordinator for both the Baltimore Ravens and the then San Diego Chargers. He was also quarterbacks coach of the Washington Redskins, and he has many years of experience coaching in college football as well. Welcome to Catholic Sports Radio, Cam Cameron.
Thanks, Bruce. Thrilled to be on the show. Ever since you and I talked about me coming on, I've been excited for it, and really just looking forward to talking to you, and especially now that the football season has started.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you making the time. It's great to finally do this with you. And piggybacking a little bit off of what I was just mentioning about trusting in God to be our protector, you, Cam, have had to go through a couple scary moments yourself, meaning serious melanoma many years ago and then a prostate cancer diagnosis just a couple years ago. Talk about your prayer life during moments like those, as well as if those maybe even led you closer to God.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Bruce. A guy, my first year in the National Football League was with the Washington Redskins, and one of the most spiritual men I know, Coach Bobby Jackson. I asked him. I said, Coach, what's the advice you can give me? The best advice you can give me, just as I come into the National Football League. And he says, well, he thought. And he says, Cam, he says, the National Football League brings everybody to their knees. So my best advice for you is you might as well start there. So prayer life has been a huge part of my life and my wife Missy and our families. And and those are the times where, the first time they tell you that you have cancer and it is treatable, but it is something we need to take seriously. That's a huge part of it. But I would just encourage everybody, don't wait till you have a moment like that before you start praying. And kind of my quiet time in the morning is how I start my day. And I was just very fortunate that I developed some solid habits spiritually, and I just Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and it's all about trust, and I just trusted God in the process that I had to go through with the melanoma. And ironically, I was at the University of Michigan where the first melanoma clinic was, so that was amazing. And then having been with the Baltimore Ravens, even though I was at LSU when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, obviously Johns Hopkins there in Baltimore is on the cutting edge of all the research, and I was able to reach out to those people and had really a life-saving surgery and doing great. So, but no, prayer life is center for all of us, and I think we just all kind of try to stay in that constant state of prayer throughout the day.
Yeah, similarly, your son Chris is in the military, and there was an accident in June where he was training. One cadet was killed, 20 were injured, and fortunately Chris was okay and wasn't involved. But what I'm wanting the listeners to hear is that from the outside, sports can seem so glamorous, but listeners, coaches like Cam are real people, and they have the same real-world challenges as any other parent or an aging male. And as you heard him say, Cam, it does reinforce why we all need to work daily on our relationship with the Lord so that we don't only seek Him when something bad happens.
Well, without question, Bruce. And I would say I'll give you some guys that I've just been really fortunate throughout my career to be around a lot of men of faith, and some of those that come to Mass and in our Bible studies, like a Matt Burke, who was with the Minnesota Vikings for a long time. He came to the Ravens, and Roman Oben was another man, our left tackle with the San Diego Chargers, and just you develop this kind of these prayer groups and going to Mass, and then something like this that happens this summer with Chris. All of us in sports know there's risks, there's sacrifices that go with our profession, like a lot of professions. And then you add football and the military, the combination of the two, where my son Chris is, and there's just a lot of things that these guys they're in harm's way a lot. And the young man that lost his life, CJ Morgan. It's ironic. My son's name's Christopher Morgan. This young man's name is Christopher Morgan, and my son had Morgan being his middle name. But so they were very close. He was a mentor, and I'm not going to speak for Chris necessarily, but I know now, several months removed, his faith is something he really needed to lean on, because though he was not in that truck, 5 of his teammates were. CJ was a wrestler and a highly thought of young man there. Actually, Chris told me, he said, "Dad, this may be the finest young man here at West Point."
Wow.
And so, his faith was really something that he was able to rely on. And his coach, he has a strong position coach that has tremendous faith. And but the entire Catholic community that I've been involved with, and the faith communities I've been involved with in sports, especially football, has just been tremendous over the last 35 years. And though I'm not directly in the game as a coach now and don't plan on getting back in, I'm still involved with all those men to this day.
Sure. And in talking about what Chris went through, you used the word mentor. I wonder, thinking about the jobs that you have had in both college and the NFL, how much of a father or a mentor can you be to a young player in terms of giving them guidance, meaning non-football related? Or is it maybe a case of, no way, Bruce, unfortunately, college football and the NFL are big business and it's all about wins, so you got to maximize your time with the guys and do as much game prep as you can? It's
interesting because I know, I I can see kind of a little different perspective now that I'm away from the game to a degree, and how people might view coaches and athletes, and basically kind of the way the media tends to spin things a little bit. But the reality is coaches and players are very close. I won't give you the names, but people would recognize all of them, where when they were young players coming into the league, at some point in time, they were brought to their knees. And you as a coach and a mentor and as a friend, all those things, I just can't tell you how many young men I've been able to have the pleasure to hold in my arms and let them cry and be vulnerable, because they're really not going to really be quite that vulnerable, obviously in the public, and maybe sometimes even with their teammates. But no, I've been fortunate. I'll give you an example. A young man named Stephon Sullivan, who just graduated at LSU. People will be able to watch him play this year. Here's a young man that I recruited 4 years ago, and he was homeless. And so we've been able, our family and a couple other families have been able to impact his life just because his parents, were not around. And that's not all the cases, but that's a lot of cases in not just life, but for the business I was in, which was football for a long time. So you get to know them, you do the best you can do, you welcome them into your home, and try to mentor them the best you can. Not everybody is receptive, obviously.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's what makes coaching so special.
Beautiful. That
you can impact people like the people that impacted me, like Bob Clements, my high school coach, or Lee Corso, who's there'd be a guy who gets to get on the show. You'd enjoy having Coach Corso on the show. He's as devout a Catholic as you're going to find. But just mentors I've had that were all coaches, and I was fortunate to be able to hopefully do a little mentoring myself and continue today.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wonder, as a Catholic Christian, does it trouble you maybe more so than, say, a non-believer when you hear about guys getting in trouble off the field?
I think, Bruce, my biggest thing is, we're all experiential learners. We all do, we make mistakes. Try not to judge people too much. Just try to meet people where they are, and understand that hey, we all make mistakes, and there's now what are you going to do? Okay, what's your approach now? What have you learned? I'm a big as I talk, as I share my faith with people, and I also share just concepts at the same time. And it really, in most cases, there's only a couple of outcomes. One would be successful outcome, and the other would be an outcome where you learn something. And try to take failure almost out of the equation, and mistakes to a degree. I think as long as you're learning and you don't repeat those mistakes, that's what forgiveness is all about. And not really judging guys in a way that you can't forgive them. So I've tried to take that approach. Didn't always take that approach necessarily, but I know I have for a long time, and I think that helps people get through the mistakes they make. But it is a concern, and it would be for all of us, if that pattern continues.
Yeah.
And then obviously probably a different approach needs to be taken.
Well, I wonder, on episode 16 of Catholic Sports Radio, my guest was Father Chuck Dornquist, who is the team priest for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What else can an NFL player do within the confines of his role as a pro athlete to stay connected with their faith during the season, other than seeking out the team priest or the team chaplain, and of course going to Mass?
Yeah, well, I think number one, every there's 32 teams in the National Football League, and there's really, I've been on several teams, but obviously not all of them, but there's really 32 ways they go about things. And some have more of a spiritual component than others. I know when I was with the Chargers and the Ravens in particular, and the Redskins, the places I've been, and when I was the head coach of the Dolphins, that was a huge part of our day. Whether it was the coach's Bible study, whether it would be, and this is for Catholics, Christians, Christian Catholics, however, football players sometimes, some of them were Christians that went to a Catholic high school or a Catholic college, but they aren't necessarily Catholic. And then but spiritually, they're in the same ballpark, and there's Bible studies, there's coaches' Bible studies, there's player and wives Bible studies. There's just a wives Bible. There's all sorts of ways that everybody connects spiritually.
Fantastic.
And there's a ton of prayer before practice, after practice, on the field, on the teams that I've been associated with, and it's always been a spiritually awesome experience.
I like it. Were there any traditions that you brought from one job to the next, be it college or the NFL, as far as maybe a crucifix above your desk or a rosary in your pocket, or maybe quiet prayer time in the football office in the morning before you would start your workday, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's, we're all, I think, and most of us at least, we're at our best when we're in a really solid routine. And when that routine, starts, I think, for me, is in that quiet time. And I'm sure our listeners are familiar with Matthew Kelly, the Dynamic Catholic. He's a good friend. Known Matthew for, it's probably been 20 years now. But I know he always talked about that 10 minutes of silence. And what's he talking about? Well, then you start to really become more disciplined in your prayer time. And that 10 minutes every morning of just letting God speak to you really kind of just sets the stage for me. And a lot of times that's at 5:30 in the morning at the office when I was in coaching. So that was always a great way to start the day. Obviously, I have a crucifix on my necklace that Missy gave me. I've really been. I wasn't raised Catholic, so you might laugh at this, Bruce, but I converted 25 years ago. My wife Missy was Catholic, and I'd been going to Mass about 10 years prior to converting, but I have a rosary in my that's one of my, I want to get better at the rosary. And everybody, if you weren't raised Catholic, and I never went to a Catholic school, so I thought, you know what, and I've just got to get better. So I have that in my pocket. It's my right hand as we're speaking. So went to Cursillo. I just want to share this with our listeners as well, and you, Bruce. I went to Cursillo this past spring, Missy and I. We had never been to a Cursillo weekend, and that was just off the charts.
Beautiful.
And then I have every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. I have a Cursillo group that we meet, a group of men, a prayer group, and so that's kind of the routine now. Cursillo was hard to do when you were in coaching, but now that I'm in business instead of coaching, I've got time to set my own schedule. So I get to do a lot of cool Catholic things now that I can only really do in the building when I was in coaching.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Cursillo. I was going to ask you, I knew that you had done the weekend earlier this year. And listeners, if you heard the first ever episode of Catholic Sports Radio, I mentioned that I am involved in the movement in that I attend the monthly Altrea meetings, and I'm finally going to make my weekend at the beginning of October.
Are you?
Yes, I am. Looking forward to it. It's a long time coming.
Those Altreas are pretty special now. I'm telling you, the groupings, the Altreas, it is a lot of things I hear from my kids. I got 4 kids, 25, as you mentioned, Chris, but I got another one, Danny, who's coaching at Michigan. And so 25, 23, 21, and my daughter, Elizabeth, who will be a freshman in college this year. And sometimes the youth, our traditions are so awesome in the Catholic Church, but for some of the younger teenagers and young adults, sometimes they're looking for a little bit more. I'm not saying evangelical, but just are looking for more. Well, I'm going to tell you, this daggone Cursillo and just everything that with that movement is just, I can't express how exciting it is. Outstanding.
Cam, how challenging is it to be a good and faithful servant when you're doing a job such as coaching and the element of human error exists and there's a widely held acceptance for screaming at an on-field official?
Well, I tell you what, some of the most competitive people I know in sports are priests and Catholic sports enthusiasts. And they're not afraid to voice their criticisms of even a Catholic play caller on Sunday. So I always got a kick out of that. And I have a ton of Notre Dame fans that the Domers, man, they are brutal when it comes to their football. And it's all in good humor to a degree and sports minded. But hey, we all get it. It's sports are very emotional, and I've just like I said, I've been very fortunate to be a part of it for my whole life.
You mentioned a couple times references to your family. Just talk about the life of a family member of a football coach. Your wife and kids, how did they handle going through football season after football season and knowing that they could face unsolicited opinions about their husband or their dad? Is that something that you would sit and talk about as a family?
We would. And it's funny, I'm sure all the parents listening that have more than one child, same parents, same house, same math, same everything, completely different. So really have four different views, depending on when we moved and where we lived, depending on what age they were. But yeah, it's everybody has challenges raising their kids, especially in a profession where you might be moving. But our kids had a pretty unique perspective. We were 6 years in San Diego, and we're back there now. But the town we live in is a military town. So one of my sons, my oldest son, Tom, said, Dad, he goes, don't worry about us. If we wind up having to move, we're with you. As long as we're together, we're going to be fine. And he said, it's not like my classmates where their moms and dads, they leave for 6 months at a time or 9 months at a time. We at least get to see you on weekends, in the morning sometimes. And we also know that you're going to come home alive every night. So that kind of put it in perspective from my family. But with that being said, it was hard on my daughter, Elizabeth, but I think it's made her tougher, and I think she would tell you that. Two of my boys wound up playing college football. Chris, as you know, playing at West Point, and as I mentioned, Danny's now coaching in college football, and so that I think it served them well. They kind of relished it, and because they got their own criticism, just as all football players do. And then my oldest son, he could care less. He was the one sitting in the stadium with the Chargers reading Harry Potter. So he could care less. He was unfazed by any of it. So I think every family dynamic's different. But it's tough. And I always said, Bruce, that I had the easy job, that Missy had the tough job because she had to find the new dentist, the new grocery store. I just found a new office and went to work.
Wow.
And then she had to listen to all that garbage all week, where coaches, we kind of go back in our submarine during the week and get ready for the next opponent.
Well, unfortunately, we're about out of time. I just want to end on a fun note. Since you're not employed by an NFL team right now, I wonder, does that allow you to root for any one particular team? And if so, who is that team and why?
Well, it does, because I'm a fan. Though I do, full disclosure, I do consulting for network broadcasts, which is fun, keeps me busy on football about 3 days a week. But no, I root for, obviously having coached Drew Brees and having coached Phillip Rivers. Obviously, I'm always going to, and Joe Flacco, those guys are still playing, Tyrod Taylor, the guys that I've coached and been a part of drafting the teams. So I always root for those guys. Brian Schottenheimer's the offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. I coached with him, and just the guys that Pete Carmichael, there's a guy you're going to want to get on the show, I promise you, the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. So I just root for my guys, and then I kind of start to assess the season and start to figure out who I think is really the team to beat. And I also have a young man another guy I'll talk to you about, Danny Etley, a quarterback, kind of / athlete receiver for the New England Patriots, was on their Super Bowl team last year. So, it's hard to root for New England, given the fact we had a bunch of battles when I was there with Baltimore, but when I got somebody from my high school, my hometown, I root for them. So
nice.
Yeah, so I'm a fan.
Very good, very good. Cam, God bless you. Thanks so much for your time. Great to have you on the show.
Bruce, it's been my pleasure, and look forward to maybe doing this again in the future as well. Thanks.
Great.
God bless you.
Listeners, as you know, we always close with a prayer, so as tempting as it is for me to do one of my coach's prayers that I've done in the past, this time we're going to resurrect one that I've done before called the prayer to play fair in the game of life. So let's do that in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord, in the struggle that goes on through life, we ask for a field that is fair, a chance that is equal with all the strife, the courage to strive and to dare, and if we should win, let it be by the code, with our faith and our honor held high, and if we should lose, let us stand by the road and cheer as the winners go by. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks so much for listening. This is Catholic Sports Radio. Find more at catholicsportsradio.net, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It is at Cath Sports Radio on all those, CATH, at Cath Sports Radio. I am Bruce Wozniak, and remember, it's not whether you win or lose, it's that it's Jesus that you always choose.